Hello and welcome. My name is Ish, and today I'll be guiding you through an all levels yoga class. So, the theme of today's class is going to be focusing on the quality of insight and number two, mindfulness. So, any contemplative yoga practice or any kind of spiritual discipline has three specific characteristics. The first is high levels of concentration that we learn to develop. The second is sensory clarity. So, this means that we are able to look inside ourselves to break down each experience into smaller components. The third aspect is known as equanimity, and this means that you're okay with both the good and the bad. So this is what any spiritual practice will train you in. Now, what happens today in especially our modern yoga classes is that we overemphasize the calm and concentration aspect, known as shamatha practice, and we miss out on the insight practice, which is what we're going to be covering today. And as a result, you may have heard of a lot of yogis who are very calm on their mat, but once they leave and they get in their car and drive back home and they're caught in traffic, they get triggered and they lose their minds. So this is because they haven't focused on the aspect of insight, which is what we're going to focus on today. So what are some practical ways to focus on this quality? So in any yoga pose that we do, or any meditation postures that we sit in, we want to be mindful of everything that's going on in the present moment. So what this means is that you have one point of focus, which is your breath, and at the same time, you're also noticing different sensations that occur. So if you're sitting in a pose and you're stretching, you can focus on the stretch in your hamstrings. If you get distracted by sounds around you, you can just notice your hearing. So you switch your focus on anything that becomes apparent in your focus. And this is how we train ourselves to be okay with whatever's happening in every single moment. And we also develop that skill of looking inside and analyzing every single experience as it is. So we can get a taste of this first by coming into a short centering before we go into the poses. So there's a couple of different ways to sit. You can sit in a cross-legged position with either the left or right leg on top, doesn't matter which one. If you have more openness in the hips, you can take what is called half lotus. And half lotus is done where you bring the foot on top of the hip. Now, if you're able to sit in half lotus pretty well, and only do so if you're able to sit in this well, you can take what is called full lotus, and this is where you bring the bottom foot and bring it on top. So again, if your knees and ankles are screaming at you, don't do full lotus. You can sit back and do half lotus or cross-legged. We'll keep our spine straight and our ears in line with your shoulders. Take your palms, place them down onto your knees, and take a moment and close your eyes. From here, start to bring your attention specifically just above your upper lip and below your nostril area. So just this one particular point. And specifically, just watch your breath in this particular area, noticing the breath-related sensations. So for example, as you inhale, you may notice cool air press against your upper lip. And as you exhale, you may notice warmer air leave your nostrils. So continue to simply just observe your breath at this pace. And if you notice that your mind wanders or gets caught in any kind of distractions, you can simply label it. So if your mind wanders, you can label thinking. If you hear sounds outside, you can simply label in your mind hearing. And then return your awareness back to the breath. Now, this same awareness that you have in this present moment is what we're going to bring through all our poses in today's class. So anytime you lose focus, you can always bring your attention and awareness back to your breath, and at the same time just noticing your current experience. Now on your next exhale, slowly open your eyes. And if you're sitting on a cushion, you can move it out to the side. And we'll make our way onto our hands and knees for tabletop position. And we'll begin with a few cat-cows here. So on your inhale, lift the head up, coming into cow pose. On your exhale, bring the navel to the spine, drop the head, coming into cat pose. Inhale up for cow pose. And exhale, bring the navel to the spine, coming into cow pose. Cat pose rather. On your next inhale, come up to cow. And exhale, come into cat pose. And take a few more rounds of this, going at your own breath and your own rhythm. And now on your next cat position, press back to a downward facing dog. And in your first down dog of the day, you can start to pedal your feet by bending one knee and dropping the heel down, and then alternating. Opening up the backs of your calves here. And press both heels down, taking a neutral down dog. Then bend your knees and step forward, coming to ragdoll position. So in your ragdoll, your feet are hip distance apart. Bend into your knees, grab opposing elbows, and sway side to side. Then exhale, drop your hands, forward fold. Inhale, come up halfway, so the spine is straight and the crown of the head is pointing forward to the front of the room. And exhale, forward fold. Bring your hands to heart center, and then come up to a standing pose. On your next exhale, forward fold. Inhale, come up halfway. Keep the spine straight, crown of the head pointing forward. And exhale, step back to a plank pose. From here, lower all the way down to your mat, dropping your toes when you come down. Bring your hands by your ribcage and take a baby cobra, so just a subtle back bend, engaging the thighs, pressing the hips into the mat. And exhale, downward facing dog. Now bend your knees and step forward, taking a forward fold. Inhale, halfway up, and exhale, forward fold. Bring your hands to heart center, and then come up to a standing pose. So take a moment and start to check in. We were just in a standing pose just a minute ago, and notice whether your attention has started to wander. So simply observe how you feel in this present moment. If your mind has wandered or you're thinking a lot, you can simply just note, oh, I'm thinking. And then direct your attention back to the breath, specifically at the nostril area. And then as we transition to the Sun Salutation series, we can start to observe moment by moment our experience and notice what's going on. So on your next exhale, forward fold. And you can start to notice the stretch you feel in the hamstrings, so start to bring your awareness there while focusing on the breath. Then inhale, come up halfway. Notice how the stretch feels slightly different, bringing that quality of mindfulness. And exhale, step back to a plank pose. From here, lower down halfway so your shoulders are in line with the elbows. So a lot of people have a tendency to flare their elbows out, and you don't want to do that. You want to hug them in. And then from here, drop your toes, upward facing dog. So thighs engage. And exhale, downward facing dog. Bend your knees. And step forward, coming into a forward fold. Inhale, halfway up. And exhale, forward fold. Bring your hands to heart center, and then come up to a standing pose. From here, separate your feet hip distance apart, so about the width of 2 fists. So you can even put it down in between your feet, just to see that your spacing is right. And then take your peace fingers and grab a hold of your big toes. Now for this pose, we want to bend your knees slightly, and then you want to really pull on your big toes using your biceps, and your elbows should be flared out to the sides. So rather than keeping your arms straight, you actually want to bend into your arms, really pull on your big toes with the biceps. And then to create the stretch in the pose, you want to lean slightly forward, just make sure you don't face plant, and then drop your heels back down. You notice a nice stretch in the hamstrings. And then fold. Now with your hands grasping your big toes, come up halfway. So you're still holding on to the big toes here, but your spine is straight and the crown of the head pointing forward. Now we'll come into Gorilla Pose or Padhastasana. So you're going to lift your feet up, take your palms, slide them underneath. And ideally you'll work towards getting your big toes on the wrist creases. May not happen all the way, but that's something to work towards. So you're basically almost stepping on your feet. You may think this is crazy, but it's actually a really great pose if you have a job or you're typing or writing all day using your wrists. Now keeping your hands underneath your feet, come up halfway. So again, you're just going to straighten up your spine and point the crown of the head forward. Then lift your feet up, take your hands out, and just start to shake them out. Come up to a standing pose, just moving your wrists around. Plant our hands down. We'll now come into tree pose, Trikonasana. So plant your right leg down to the mat, and now bring your left heel to the right ankle. So again, the left heel will come to the right ankle, and move that left knee out to the side. Now you want to do this without moving your hips. So go to the point where you can now stop without moving your hips. And then a couple different options. You can either stay here with the heel on the ankle. If you want more of a challenge, you can bring your foot to the calf. Or for even more of a challenge, you can bring your foot to the thigh. But make sure the foot's not on the knee, so either above or below. Hands at heart center, and gaze is 45 degrees downwards. And as you stabilize your gaze, you can start to observe the sensations you feel in your left thigh compared to the right. So you're being very mindful and just noticing the subtle differences, and notice which sensations you can feel slightly more. And just observe it in your mind. And if you fall out of tree pose, totally okay. You can just get back into it. You can also start to observe which way you wobble. Something we don't normally think about. But if you start to bring this level of mindfulness in our pose, we can observe, oh, am I shifting to the right or am I shifting to the left? And start to really observe your experience second by second. Lift your left leg up now and flex into the left foot. From here, we'll come into a figure four. So you might want to watch me first. I'll bring my left foot and ankle over the standing right leg. And then from here, I'll sit my hips back, kind of like I'm sitting back in a chair. So rather than bring my knee all the way down, and this caused me knee pain in a couple of years, what I'm going to do instead is sit back as if I'm sitting in a chair. And the whole time, I'm going to keep my left foot flexed, and you'll find that engagement in the right thigh. So I'm sitting back and my chest and head are facing forward. So I'm not looking down towards the floor, but rather looking straight ahead. So it's really up to you as far as how far you want to take it. So you'll find the stretch in the outer thigh. And if your hands come down, only if they do, you'll hook the foot on the tricep. Now, if you've been practicing for a while and you do want a deeper stretch, what you could do is bring your hands behind you, sit back, and then bring the chin to the knee. So obviously that is a more intense outer thigh variation. And whichever variation you're in, you can slowly start to rise all the way up and shake that leg out. Bad news is we got one more side. So plant the left thigh down and now bring the right heel to the left ankle. Once again, move your knee out to the side without moving your hips. So once you find a point where you're good, where you're not going to move your hips, from here you can either stay here, bring the foot to the calf, or you can bring the foot on the thigh, but make sure it's not on the knee. Hands at heart center and bring your gaze 45 degrees downwards. So bring your awareness now to the breath, and at the same time, start to observe the sensations of the pose, whether you're wobbling to one side or the other, or whether you feel a stretch more in one leg compared to the other. Start to take into account your experience. Then now, coming into figure four, lift the right leg up, flex into the right foot, and bring it over the standing left leg. So once again, I'm sitting my hips back, kind of like I'm sitting back in a chair. My chest and head are facing forward. And it's really up to you as far as how far you want to take it. And if your hands come down, you'll hook the foot on the tricep. And once again, if you're doing the more advanced variation where you feel it in the outer thighs, you'll just sit your hips back, keep flexing into the foot, and bring your chin to the knee. And then whichever variation you're in, you can start to rise all the way up and shake your legs out. Our next pose will be Malasana, Yogic squat. So for this pose, I'll show you 3 different variations so you can see which one you like to do. The first variation, and each variation, by the way, will become a bit more intense. So the first one is you'll sit down on your mat and bring your heels to the width of your mat and your feet pointed outwards at a 45-degree angle. So from the front view, it looks like this. So my heels will line up to the edges of the mat, and then I'll bring my triceps to the inside of the inner thighs, hands at heart center, and then bring my hands closer towards my sternum. And to create that stretch in that pose, you want to push your thighs into the triceps and triceps against the thighs, and then slowly start to straighten up your spine and bring the hands closer towards the sternum. So this is option number 1. Option number 2 is you're going to do the same thing, but your hips are off the mat. So you're looking like this. Might have heard my hip pop just now. So it's a bit more intense as far as your hips. And I'm doing the same thing where my hands come to the sternum right here. Now, if you have been practicing for a while and you'd like to take this a bit deeper, and again, only do this if you're able to sit in this Malasana pretty easily, you'll come into a third variation. So for that, what I'll do is I'll bring my hands around and over my shins. I'll lift my heels up, bring my hands underneath, and drop the crown of the head down. You guys look pretty good upside down. So this is the third variation of this pose. And then when you're ready, start to rise up in whichever variation you're in. Bring your hands behind you, and then sit back down to the mat. We made it down. What we'll do now is bring our feet together and just start to flap our knees up and down. And before coming into butterfly, I like to add a bit of movement. So grabbing hold of your big toes, just start to rotate in circular fashion. And if you go in one direction, go the other way. And then come back to neutral spine. So for butterfly, you want to keep your spine straight and lead with your chest. So rather than drop your head all the way down and kind of hit the floor, what you want to do is go a bit slower and lead with your chest. So it looks like this. And eventually coming down. If you find that you have tighter hips in this pose, you can always place blocks underneath your knees, or if you have pillows, you can also use that as well, just to provide some support. Now coming back to our theme, start to notice where your attention is. So if your attention is now going to your mind and you're probably like, oh, I don't like this pose or whatever the case is, you can start to simply note, I'm thinking right now. And then bring your awareness back to the breath. And at the same time, you can also notice the sensations that you feel in this pose. So for example, feeling the stretch in the inner thigh or the hips, you can simply note feeling stretch in the hips. So you're simply labeling your experience and bringing your awareness back to the present moment, just as it is. And then start to walk your hands a bit closer towards you. And then using your hands to press yourself up. And then where you're at, you'll extend your left shin out in front of you at a 45-degree angle. And then bring the right leg back, also at a 45-degree angle. So your legs will resemble two 45-degree angles. And this is called deer pose. So you may have heard of pigeon pose. This is an easier variation, or so they say, of pigeon pose. One thing you want to do is make sure that your right back hip isn't popping way up. So you might need to plant it back down. If you do have a block, you can always slide them underneath. And now from here, there's different options on way to fold. You can fold over the knee. You can fold straight down over the shin. Or another option is you can fold towards the foot, so on the inside. So it looks like this. And then slowly start to walk your hands closer towards you. And then press yourself up. And from here, lean over to the left hip and swing your right leg up and over. So the right leg will come up and over, and you'll take a cross-legged position with the right leg on top. So this is a cross-legged position with the right leg on top. Now you can either stay here, straighten up the spine, and walk your hands forward, coming to a seated fold. The second option is you can take what is called a square pose. So this is slightly more intense. And what you'll do is you'll bring your right ankle on top of the bottom left knee and flex into the right foot. And so you can see that my legs resemble a square shape here. And then walk the hands forward and fold. The third option is you can take what is called Shoelace Pose. This is where the knees stack upon each other. So the knees are on one line. And if you can, try to bring the shins in one line as well. And then fold forward. So simply just start to note your experience, noticing if you feel the stretch in the outer thighs or the legs or different parts of your legs, and start to observe this experience moment by moment. And start to walk your hands closer towards you. And then press yourself up. In whichever variation of this you are in, unwind your legs and start to windshield wipe your knees side to side. So plant your feet down and just bring your knees to one side and then the other. Extend the right leg out at a 45-degree angle. The left leg will now come behind you. So once again, this is deer pose. So two 45-degree angles with the legs. And this time you want to make sure that the left hip doesn't pop all the way up. So you want to plant it back down. And a block or a pillow is a good option to put underneath if your hips go all the way up. So you want to plant it back down. Now either fold towards the knee, so to the outside. You can fold straight down in the middle. Or bring your chin and face to the inside, coming to the foot. And then begin to walk the hands closer towards you. And then press yourself up. Lean over to the right hip this time and swing the left leg up and over. So taking a cross-legged position with the left leg on top. And you can choose to come into a seated forward fold here by straightening up the spine, walking the hands forward, and just folding down. The second variation of this pose is square pose. So once again, left foot will come on top of the right knee, so your legs will resemble a square shape, and then fold forward. Third variation is shoelace legs. So the left knee will come on top of the right knee, and ideally, if you can, try to bring your shins in one line. If it doesn't happen today, all good, no worries. And then just fold forward. Begin to walk the hands close towards you. And then using the weight of your hands, press yourself up. Unwind those legs. And windshield wipe your knees side to side. Then extend your legs out long into a V, so coming into a straddle position. Now this pose can be quite intense on the hips, so there's a couple different options here. So if you find that this is tugging at your hips a bit more, what you can do is bend into your knees and plant your feet down. And this actually looks like a lot like the Malasana variation we did earlier. So this is actually a great way to come into this pose by just taking Malasana. So keeping your knees bent, the triceps by the inner thighs, hands at heart center. If you find that your knees are a bit tweaky in this pose, what you can do is bring your feet closer together. So certainly there's different ways to go about this pose. And I also recommend elevating your sit bones up so you could sit on a blanket as well. And for this variation, go a bit slower. So just walking your forearms down and just coming to a nice place where you feel the edge, but you're not pushing yourself a bit too much. The more important thing is the level of mindfulness you can bring into this pose. So as you sit here, rather than pushing yourself a bit too hard and getting lost in your thoughts, what you can do instead is simply notice your breathing. At the same time, direct your attention to the stretch you feel in the hips, so you can observe, I can feel a stretch. And simply just keep bringing your awareness back to the stretch and the breath at the same time. And start to walk your hands closer towards you. And using your hands, press yourself up. Bring your hands underneath your knees. Pick them up. Plant them back down. They're probably a little sore. And then bring your hands behind you and just start to windshield wipe your knees side to side. Then from here, take a comfortable cross-legged position. And we'll now enter the meditation portion of today's class. So before we had worked on coming through different poses and bringing your awareness to whatever is going on in the present moment. So this means having a slight awareness and anchor to our breath, and at the same time also noticing the stretch we feel moment by moment. So in this practice, we're going to expand upon that and come into a Vipassana practice or insight practice. So this practice this style of practice was formerly taught by Mahasi Sayadaw, who was a Burmese meditation master. And what is good about his type of teaching is that his teaching is very accessible to a lot of people that weren't necessarily monks, but rather lay people as well. So he taught a lot of people who hadn't meditated before, and he really got them to really great insights and a lot of meditative, helped them in their meditation journey through this particular practice. Because through Vipassana and through the insight practices, what we understand is that we learn that nature itself in our life is comprised of different moments that arise and pass. And through this particular meditation practice, we actually can see for ourselves that moments come and pass. And if we learn to label these moments, so noticing our experience, then different things like very strong emotions like anger or hatred or being really filled with anxiety, those things have less of a grip against us, because on some understanding, we understand that these feelings and emotions will pass as soon as they arise. So that's something we can experientially see for ourselves. So there's a couple of different ways to sit once again. You can sit in a cross-legged position with either the left or right leg on top. If it's in your practice, you can take what is called half lotus. So once again, just bringing the foot on top of the hip. And you may find now that it's a bit easier to do this just because we've worked on our outer thighs and hips. And if it's in your practice, you can take what is called full lotus, so bringing the bottom leg on top. So like this. And we'll bring our hands face down on our knees, and we'll take a moment and close our eyes. And start to bring your awareness now to the lower abdomen. And specifically just notice the rising and falling of your belly as you inhale and exhale. So just a reminder, you're not consciously controlling your breath, rather just observing it as your abdomen naturally rises as you inhale and naturally falls as you exhale. And you're just going to note the rising, so it's just saying silently in your mind, rising as you inhale, and note falling as you exhale. So continue to just simply note rising as you inhale and falling as you exhale. So as you note the in-breath and out-breath, if you notice that your attention now wanders and you start to think a lot, you can simply just observe thinking and then come back to noticing the rising and falling of your breath. If there's a lot of thoughts going on, you may have to repeat thinking, 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 and just keep going until the thoughts start to disappear, and then switch your awareness back to the breath. If your awareness gets distracted by your hearing, for example, getting caught by different sounds around you, you can simply just label hearing, just as we did for thinking, and then direct your attention back, once it's subsided, to the quality of the breath, so rising and falling. Just a few more moments here in this meditation. Start to observe whether you feel any kind of soreness or any kind of pain in your body. And you can simply just note that as well. So the classic meditation problem is knee pain, so you can simply note knee pain, knee pain, knee pain, or lower back pain. And then once that's subsided, you'll notice that as you keep looking into that sensation, it'll soon disappear. And once that sensation has fully disappeared, you bring your awareness back to the breath. You can slowly start to open your eyes. And then with your hands on your knees, just start to rotate in a circular fashion. And then go the other way. And then come back to neutral spine. Plant your feet down. And if you were sitting on a meditation cushion, you can move it out to the side. And then hug your knees into your chest and come onto your back. And give yourself one last hug in this position before we come into our final resting pose, Shavasana. So in Shavasana, your eyes will be closed and your palms face up. And this is a period of just relaxing and allowing things to happen. So you're just allowing yourself to relax and let go. And I will guide you to Shavasana when the time has come. Now slowly start to bring awareness and attention back to your body. Wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes. Unbend your knees. And roll over to your right side, coming into a fetal position. On your next exhale, press up to a seated position with your eyes closed. Take a moment and start to bring your attention back inwards. Notice the current quality of your attention. Notice the current quality of your breath. Notice the current quality of your mind. And observe the state of both your mind and body. Notice how you feel in this present moment compared to the beginning of class. Then bring your hands to heart center and acknowledge yourself for taking the time to practice yoga today. Namaste.